All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Comic Book Radio. Thank you for being here. I'm your host Peter Cimetti. This is episode 192, and tonight my guest is Nick PITARRA. We're going to be talking about the power of persistence, creating consistency when you're creating your comic, and your career, and your life, and all that other stuff. It's going to be a good conversation. I'm excited to have it. Before we get started, I want to talk to you guys for just a second. We got Rob Geronimo's Blood Realm campaign. About 5 days left. It's like 93.8% funded. Check it out if you haven't yet. Also, the King Cryptic campaign. That's mine. That's my monster, mystery, action, adventure, sci-fi, horror, yada yada, all over. Everything is in there. Series. Issues 5 to 9 are on Indiegogo, in demand, and also on the Alterna site right now. You guys can go check that out. Please do so. The links are in the description of the show. And also go subscribe to Nick's YouTube channel, too. I know he's maybe not on there a lot, but there's some good stuff on there. All right, so before we bring Nick on, I want to say hello to those of you in the chat. We got Zaid Comics here. What's up, Zaid? Hope you're doing well. We got Massive Panda in the chat, too. How's it going, Massive Panda? Abo Grizzly's here. How's it going, Abo? Asks, what's a good measure between persistence or madness? I think once you start to detect the latter, the former is gone. So that's up to you. It's a very personal decision. Some of us never, ever detect that touch of madness. And you keep going. And maybe that's what you're supposed to do, but who knows? Like I said, it's up to you. It's very personal. Doc says, "Hail, Pete. Thanks for the show with Dina Martin. Really enjoyed it." Yeah, that was great. That was a highlight of not just doing these shows, but, man, a highlight of my life. That was great yesterday, and I hope eventually I could bring her back on again in the future. I don't want to be too pushy. You know, maybe I'll try 6, 7, 8 months down the road. We'll see. Maybe around late fall, early winter, before Christmas time, maybe October, November, around there. I'll give her another message. But that was a wonderful conversation, and I was glad we were able to have that. Thank you, man. Wayne, what's up, Wayne? Hope you're doing good. Thank you for being here. We got Abo Grizzly saying showtime. Ravindra, how's it going, Ravindra? What's good with you? What are you up to, buddy? Hope you're doing well. Davey Lee is here. Says, let's go. Yeah. Hey, look at that. Nick's in the chat, too. He's a man about town. He's everywhere tonight. Ravindra says, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Though sometimes you can do the same thing over and over again and get a different result. Believe it or not. But I hear ya. All right, so without further ado, let's bring him on. Give him a big Comic Book Radio welcome. The man of the hour, Mr. Nick PITARRA. What's up, Nick?
What's up, Peter, man? Thanks for having me on, brother.
Oh, no problem, man. I'm looking forward to having this conversation tonight. I think it's going to be a fun one. You were on, Ink Pulp, right? When was that? That was very recent.
Yeah, it was actually about 6 weeks ago, but they recorded ahead of time. So I met Sean Crystal out at OAX, which is it's a new convention in Florida. It's in Orlando, and it's all the original art collectors got together, and it's a really small show, but a really intimate show. It was one of my favorites I've ever been to. So I met him, and I'm pretty over the top about this crowdfunding game that we're all in, and promoting comics online, and everyone taking control of where we're headed, you know, where our journey's going, instead of being at the whims of publishers or the big two, or hoping and praying that people reach out to you. Just do it yourself. And for me, I made that turn a couple of years ago, and I know you've been doing it longer than that. And it's like, man, it's so empowering. All the dread from pushing yourself, or all the dread from watching the big two and seeing mistakes made that you wouldn't necessarily make if your dreams are tied to that, you're quickly in despair about, like, that's my dream fading. There's less jobs, there's less money. Some of these characters I loved, I don't want to work on anymore. But the second you flip the switch and you look at this like the Wild West and use social media like you're doing with YouTube and Twitter and Instagram and what we're all trying to do, now we get to be the promoters. We get to be the means of production. We get to decide what we show. We don't have to ask permission anymore. And all the negatives become a positive for your own company, you know?
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
your ability to speak, if you can speak well. Sometimes I'm on, sometimes I'm not on, but having a show like yours or getting out and talking to the people, I don't have to sit and I don't have to sit on pages of Axel or John. I can show them being produced early instead of being told I can't show it. And also, I'm not dedicating my time to building someone else's IP. I don't have to be the 500th person to draw Spider-Man. I can be the first person to draw Axe Wielder or whatever product we want to put out. And that is so emboldening, man. It's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, this space right now, if you're an independent creator, if you're just someone that you've got tremendous amount of ideas combined with a great work ethic, sky's the limit. There's no excuses right now. You know, whatever you want to make of it, you can. And I think that's something, especially if you go down that road of the traditional corporate structure and you're someone who wants to really create characters and do something innovative, let's say, just go down your own path. I know some people might say, and you will get help, I believe, that if you do go down that path, you do it correctly, and it's difficult still. But yeah, you'll benefit from getting out there, getting the word out about you, your stuff, your ability. You know, there's some people that I think maybe they take advantage too much of whatever's going on at the corporate structure that they're at, and they can't really parlay that into a successful indie career because they kind of did a bunch of different missteps along the way. But if you're someone who's got a lot of ideas and you're willing to have that persistence and that consistency of creativity, man, you can do a tremendous amount right now. So it's great to see yourself and so many others doing that and having so much success with it. And I'm glad to hear that you're liking it, because sometimes people, they get into it and maybe, you know, they do it, they have success, but they end up kind of hating it and wishing they just stuck to the other tried and true path. How has that been for you in terms of not just doing the crowdfunding aspect of it, but you're doing everything essentially? You're your own publisher.
Yeah, man, it's a lot, but it's a lot of fun, you know. I can live with it being on me, you know. Like I can live with that. What I don't like is not having the control or the say in my career. An example would be, you know, Axel or John was pretty successful on Zoop. We broke 200K, and Zoop is a kind of an unknown platform, but they help with fulfillment and really arrange a lot of stuff. But before I was doing that, like I said, I was having all that angst in the about the industry, and I don't know, something about the crowdfunding space was so attractive to me. I think the art gets a bigger bump because the big two is such, you know, I used to work with Hickman quite a bit, and he's a good friend, but I'm 1/5 of his promotional arm of one of the 5 or 6 books he's putting out, you know, and people don't know me. Like, I'm sure your audience doesn't know me. I'm the, hopefully I want to be known as
they know you.
Well, I want to be known as the guy that when they see Axel or John, you know, they think of
that's
me.
Great.
You know, like I want them to see the character and know who I am. Just like when you say Hellboy, you think Mignola. When you say Madman, you think Mike Allred. You say Usagi, you think Stan Sakai. I want that avatar in this space to represent me. And man, there's so much pressure in the crowdfunding space. I think the initial thing is the fear. You might be making good money at the big two or at Image or wherever you're working, but it's really pushing your cards on the table. Like, I remember with John, we asked for 25K. I was about that in the whole working on it, you know, just not paying myself, but paying the colorist and the designers, and you know the money goes when you're putting books together.
Oh yeah.
And it was like, people were like, you can't ask for 25 because you'll embarrass yourself if you get 6, you know? And And people have that fear, right? They're like, all of a sudden my worth is on the table. But I knew I had, and you spoke to people helping you out. I knew I had a good core of people around me. You know, Hickman gave me a shout out in his newsletter. Felix Comic Art reached out to his newsletter. A lot of shows had me on and let me yap about, you know, the book and why I made it. And really looking up from the page for the first time and looking at the industry was so fun. Like, I loved every second of it. Like, and I didn't look at any show as too small or too big. It was like, I'm going to saturate this message of this book into the market. And then there's this other part of it too, when you're crowdfunding a book. You know, we did have an early PDF, but it wasn't complete. But I really thought that the story on why you're making it, like if you were a Big Two creator, you could say, you could flash a Marvel logo, a DC logo, an Image logo, a Dark Horse logo, and then you could say, but now I'm doing it my way. And this story came to me, and for me, my story came to me when my kid was sick. So it's got that heartstring manipulation to it too, but it was the truth.
Oh, you
so
need that, yeah.
Yeah, so like it's actually the sell on why you're making it or why you are bringing it to the public. And for me, my ultimate fear, I'm 41 now. I didn't want to be 45 or 55 and keep going to a new 24-year-old assistant editor and asking them if it was okay to make my art. I was like, I'm never doing that. And I'm lucky to be pretty decent friends with Jeff Darrow, who's an idol of mine. And we talked about this extensively with Shaolin Cowboy. And he's like, dude, that's the way it is. You have to do it your way. And then he's like, welcome to being a creator now, instead of, he didn't say anything bad, but instead of being someone who's being pulled along with the tide, you're on the top of the water and you're selling your own ship. And those waters can be treacherous, right? Those waves can be big. Problems will come, guaranteed. Problems you never thought of are going to come. But man, it's fun to navigate that. Like, you get a couple of buddies in there with you, and you first 2 times it happens, you think you're drowning. After the 10th or 12th time it happens, you're just like, well, how are we going to fix it? You know? And I like MMA a little bit, and I love Dana White when he speaks. He's like, a fight's canceled right in the middle of a press conference, and he's like, oh God, you know, oh well, I guess we're getting sued tomorrow, or we're doing this. And it's just the mindset of just plowing forward. And you talk about persistence, and I need to be more persistent with my work ethic. You know, like that's a big thing for me, is I get bogged down in details and draw giant pages and pretty slow. But there's a persistency to picking yourself back up and marching forward. And we had that question about madness, and my wife is a writer, and she's a more successful career than me as a cartoonist. But she is I don't think it's madness. I think you got to be a little bit naive and a little bit bold, because if you knew the challenges up front, you might not do it. But for some reason, we believe we could get in this comic book game and this shrinking industry, and we're going to do it. You know, we're going to draw, we're going to write, we're going to produce books. And that is, you got to be a little bit dumb or a little bit bold. You can call it mad, tinkering on the edge of that.
You got to be obsessed.
You got to be obsessed. You got to love it. You got to love it, you know?
It's a calling, that's for sure. And once you're bitten by that bug, man, that's a tough one to let loose. You just got to go with it and see it through.
Yeah, and you see those books published, you see your name on them, you see your logo on them, and it's freaking cool, man. And it's a lot of work. And there's something about, I've had day jobs before. I didn't really get started full time until I was about 30 in the industry. So I've been doing it full time for 11 years, but published at Marvel for about 15 now, since I got my first work, but I couldn't do it full time yet. And it was like, you get to mark your days, you know, instead of doing the office job, which I did until 30, they're all the same thing, you know, it's the same thing over and over again. But we're creating original stories. We have these original pages. We're making these products, and it's like you get to say, in 2024 this came out, or in 2019 this happened, and it's like you get a little timestamp with your life with it, you know. And I really dig that.
Absolutely, yeah. We got a lot of great comments in the chat today. Guys, I don't know if you can see it too, but on my end, I have StreamYard's telling me I have no one watching on YouTube. I have no one watching on YouTube. I have 113 watching on Twitter. Yesterday, the way it went, I had no one watching on Twitter, and I had everybody on YouTube. So I don't know what's going on. Some people are reporting things within the chat. So if you guys are having a problem with commenting or anything like that, I really apologize. But hopefully it's okay for you. Handsome Pelican, thank you for the super chat. Says Nick, where's your bench?
Where's my bench at? Well, I used to rep 315. I was big into arm wrestling for a while. People don't know this, but I got in Texas rankings in arm wrestling, and there's a lot of big dudes in Texas. I was right-handed super heavyweight number 8. They got about 100 something guys listed. I used to love arm wrestling in bars. That turned into me seeing someone in Austin. I don't live there anymore, but there was a pro arm wrestler there, and he lived down the street from me. And I was like, I'm gonna go knock on this dude's door, and I did. And then I just got my butt kicked for 5 years, and eventually I started beating some dudes. But I used to bench. I never had a spotter, but I used to rep 315. I can probably hit 315 once now, but I used to work out at that level. But now I got kids. That was 4 or 5 years ago since I was at my peak. But yeah, I was into lifting. Now I'm into eating and getting fat, unfortunately. All that muscle just turns to mush.
Oh, man.
But, it's all good, man. I love competition, even though I'm a big guy, I play pickup basketball when I can, although my knees don't appreciate it. And there's something about going to when you go lift and you get into it, man, it builds your confidence. There's something about
you can take on the world.
Yeah. Or, it just does something to you. I have a new buddy, actually, Phil, Zaid Comics, is starting to deadlift and stuff, and we message. I'm not the best example right now because I'm not in any kind of shape, but he's lifting, and you could see his confidence building, and not that you're going to kill everyone in the room, but maybe you won't be killed if someone goes berserk in the room, right? And that feels good,
Well, there's a certain kind of confidence that you build from that, knowing that if you want to move, you can move. Yeah. If you want to pick something up, you could pick something up. You're not going to injure yourself. But there's that, going back again to that persistence, that dedication. It's the same kind of thing. Building your physical muscles is the same kind of thing as building your creative muscles and your artistic muscles. And it takes time. And I think some people aren't patient with that. They want to go right for it. It's like if you've never lifted before and you want to go right for, 150 pounds. And you're like, yeah, whatever. I'm just going to lift that up. And you don't know how to do it and just going to go for it. You're going to hurt yourself. And it's the same thing that happens, I think, when some people, they're not patient with when they're starting off. And they're going to go for it. They're going to go right away. And the ego's all about it, but the skills aren't up to it yet. And then the ego gets really hurt. And then you get defeated and you feel demoralized. And maybe you don't want to go back to it again. And the worst thing maybe that comes along is, and I see this a lot as a publisher, when people come in with submissions, they'll send in stuff sometime and they'll even let me know flat out they've never done anything before. This is the first time they're drawing or writing anything. And they're rushing into it. And they're not taking the time to learn anything yet or build up their craft or anything along those lines. Share it with other people, get some feedback before going down the line of submitting. So what was that like for you when you were entering this space as a creator in terms of pursuing it professionally? How did you go about it?
Well, first off, you're triggering some thoughts, but I have a degree in teaching like middle school art, right? And dude, that's the lesson I gave every kid. In middle schools, you get to do the trick of showing them, 2D shapes to 3D shapes, and quickly the kids that can start building with the 3D shapes can draw out of their head, and they're like the best person in class. So then they believe in themselves, and it kind of gets them hooked into art. But the one thing I taught people was, we're not going to go draw like what you see in the comic. We're going to draw this simple circle, this simple shape, and we're going to build. And I used to use lifting, or Michael Jordan didn't start by dunking a basketball. He started with barely dribbling. Arnold didn't start by bench pressing 500 pounds. He probably got stopped at 85 pounds. And so don't think you're just going to pick it up or think that you suck if you don't dunk the basketball right away. There's also the inverse of that is you don't want it all right away. There's nothing better than the journey. I said my wife's a writer. She's 37. She just got a huge, an incredible deal, Hollywood stuff, and everything's happening. But man, how many failures did she have from middle school to high school to getting her master's at Purdue to writing books that didn't get picked up to finally getting an agent? And each one of those wins for her feels so earned, like wanting the reward of it. And I've had the same thing happen where you meet young creators and they want it all right now. But there's that yin and yang. Like I have a kid named Ken who comes over he says he's my assistant, but if you see my dirty office, he ain't much of an assistant. We just eat pizza and hang out. But he's doing the YouTube thing. But I kind of want him to do what I did and work on the craft, like work on the craft. And you asked about my own journey. My own journey was very much. Let me tilt this down since my thing's coming down. My own journey was going with, as conventions came, I would do new pages, and that might be 3 pages, 4 pages in 6 months. This is when I was in my early 20s. But I would make sure they were the best they could be. I would redraw them 10 times, but I wanted new pages at the front of my portfolio. And that was about what I can handle. Then eventually you do 4 or 5 conventions in a year, and that means you're doing about 20 pages. And then eventually you're thinking, oh man, I could almost do my own comic at 20 pages. I don't know. Even my first work was at Marvel. It was an anthology. It was Marvel Tales. So it was only 8 pages a month. And that was the most I'd ever done in a month. And that was a killer, you know? Before that, I'd entered a contest, Comic Book Idol, and we had to do 3 or 4 pages a week. And that killed me, you know, pulling all-nighters. And they taught me what an all-nighter was. And I stayed on that all-nighter game for about 15 years, where I only slept about 5 nights a week for about 15 years in comics, where I would just stay up. And it was a man's all-nighter. It wasn't like I stayed up till 4 then crashed. I would stay up, sun go down, stay up until the sun goes down again, you know? And that's how... And
that's brutal, man.
Yeah, the least healthy thing you could do.
Yeah.
But I think, like, thinking about, you know, advice for people is thinking about your projects. Maybe start with a single issue. Maybe start with some anthologies that are floating around. Maybe don't just jump into your 7-book epic trade paperback thing that's, you know, 25 issues. If you've never finished, you know, 20 pages in a row, don't go with 120 pages next. One of my buddies, Riley Brown, early on, he's a Deadpool artist, but he said never ever do anything more than double what you've ever done. So if you've only done a 4-page story, don't do anything above an 8. If you've only done a 20-page story, don't promise a 48-page story. Promise a 40-page and build up. And I do think you need to bite it off in chunks, and you're learning your craft as you go. And I think that's really good advice. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because you're always going to be learning. And that's something that even when I've given rejections with submissions, to let people know, like, just because this one's not working out, continue to learn, continue to grow, continue to dive into it, and have expectations for yourself, but drop the expectations for other people. And what I mean by that is, if the higher your expectations are for others, I find the less we expect of ourselves, because the more we kind of put that power upon them and say that, well, they're capable of doing this, they can take my career far. What can I really do for me? And that's such an awful lie that we can perpetuate to ourselves. But instead go, you know, I have expectations for myself. I want to set my expectations higher than anyone could possibly be expecting them of anyone else. No one can put their expectations for me higher than I can put my expectations for me. And if anything, go out there and expect people to be in the same mindset, so that this way you're always pushing yourself forward. But I find that sometimes there is this tendency we have to kind of maybe kick back when things don't go our way. It's someone else's fault. This thing went wrong. That thing went wrong. We couldn't control it, whatever it may be. And instead of seeing, well, what could we have done different, and what could we do different next time? And that kind of stuff, I think, is really important when it comes to you with what you've done over your career. What specifically has occurred over time where you felt like, maybe I could have done this differently, and then you applied that and went and did it differently on the next go around?
Well, there's a few things. Let me go back to that question. Actually, I'll stick with that question. So, like, there's a lot of things. I think I should have branched out into writing earlier. On Manhattan Projects, it was a New York Times bestseller with Hickman, and we co-own it, and I just made great money, you know, and it was easy. But while I was working with him, we worked Marvel style, and I learned plotting, because we would get together and plot the stuff out, and then I would kind of draw to the plot points halfway through the issue. The characters could meander a little bit, but I knew where I was going on the page turns, on the big reveals, And that paying attention to that, working with Hickman, really helped me when I converted to writing. The taking more ownership of your career earlier is my biggest regret, but I don't know if I would have ever been ready when it was time. My big flaw in my career is I did Leviathan with John Layman. We got 3 issues in, supposed to be 5. We had a falling out. My kid got sick, and then the book got canceled or delayed and never got around to it. Bills piled up with medical bills. Had to start doing commissions. Took a couple of small Marvel and DC gigs. Never got back to it. So that's a big fault of mine. I probably should have never done that when I was venturing out on my own. I should have taken my heat or my little bit of name I had off Manhattan Projects and instantly did Axe Wielder. But I didn't have Axe Wielder at the time. I did have some ideas, but I didn't have my idea that I believed in yet. And Hickman was trying to push me out of the nest, saying, "Hey, you need to do your own thing. You're funny. You know the story beats. You can do this." And he always tries to push us out, but all of us feel comforted staying with the writer. And Layman was doing Chew, and Hickman obviously has a lot of big projects, so it's kind of easy to stay or look for that thing. But for me, when John, the idea for John came to me, I was like, man, I can do this. I really believed I could do it, but I didn't just think I was good enough. Like, I've seen what it takes for my wife to write. I'm really critical when I read books on writing or anything, or comic books, or watch media. And so I was like looking at my life as my tapestry of storytelling. Like everything I've absorbed, everything that I've read, if something wasn't working, then I was teaching myself something, and I was giving credit to that, right? Like, and I can give 100 examples, but the idea was that you can learn, and all writers do this. You look at the things, what memories pop into your head that are profound to you. What's that? What does that say about that person? You can hide that behind the mask of a barbarian or a Galactus or a Superman, and you can really think about the problems that you could create for a Superman. You know, what's his real foil? It's his heart, you know? So I've got this great Superman story that's got Bizarro, which is essentially of mice and men meets Bizarro and Superman. But it's this really crazy, sweet story, but really Bizarro's the one guy that could take him down, right? And his heart is what keeps Bizarro close, even though he's this devolving, more dangerous thing. That say Batman is more Batman's planning for everything. He's the grounded man. You know, Superman comes from the light. One's in the dark, one's in the light. One comes from above, one is ground level, you know? And so you got this grounded man, this godless man, this material man in Bruce Wayne, and you got this man living amongst the commoners in Clark Kent that comes from above. And I love that he's like the Jesus and the other one's the guy without God, right? I love that. But what could really be their foil? Give them a problem that they're both right about. Bizarro's too dangerous to have around. Superman's too compassionate not to keep him around, but he's too important to the world not to be saved. So like think about people in your life, a sweet aunt that's got a problem, and just put the superhero aesthetics on top of it, or barbarian on top of it. And what we do as artists is we look at the world and we hold a mirror up to it. I see you, Pete. I see what you're doing. I put you on a page and I say, I see you. We need that space and we need that creative freedom. This is why freedom of speech is so important to me, because I think it's freedom of thought and freedom of creation, essentially, to hold up to society and say, I see that sweet aunt. I see this government doing bad stuff. And we tell our stories and we're holding that mirror up. And why guys like R. Crumb are really cool to me is I don't necessarily agree with what he's doing, but he's so nuts that he's holding his mirror up, going nuts, like batshit behind us. And so society naturally doesn't want to be reflected upon, especially their faults. So instead of society pulling their arrow back and pointing at me, like everyone's got a target on our Crumb, you know? And those guys need to exist, even if you don't agree with what they're making, because it gives everyone else the freedom to do that. And once you realize that that's your function as an artist, and when you capture those truths, and there are hardcore moral tales and truths that are timeless, and you put the mask and aesthetic of what you love, all the pop culture you've absorbed, when you realize that's what you've been doing, when you've been watching people, when you were the quiet kid drawing, when you were the quiet kid reading books. When you see that in the material you love that material. So take the stuff that you love, that you remember, that someone told you, that something you saw that was unique to you, put that in the work. And then once you realize that your life is that song and your perception is that voice, now you've got to do the work to build the craft. And then once you can get drawing well enough, or pacing well enough, or plotting well enough, and you've got to dedicate yourself to that. It can't just be like, I got an idea. You got to go. And then now, we're having to learn how to produce. We're having to learn how to promote. We're having to do all the other stuff too, which is cool. It's new territory for me. But I do think when you start looking at your life like a song, that in the chords you remember, the things that are popping into your head now that meant something to you, put a mask on it, put a He-Man on it, and tell that story, and you could do some incredible stuff and some meaningful stuff if you learned your craft. And that takes a lot of consistency. When I like I say, obviously my life is my thing I'm reflecting on, is what all probably creators do. Then you also have to have the discipline to learn the craft side, and the craft side is so important, right? Because no one's going to get that message if you can't do page turns the right way. No one's going to get that message if your drawing's lacking. No one's going to believe that world exists beyond the page if your perspective falls apart right out of the field of view. You got to learn this stuff.
The language of comic book storytelling.
Yeah, and you've got to love it. And you kind of know it. You can look at it and know what's wrong, but that doesn't mean you know how to do what's right yet. But you dedicate yourself to that. And then the rewards that come are long before they get here, but they hit your heart and your soul with such magnitude when you can hit a note, when you do get that reader that's like, oh man, you got me on this, or I love this page. And that stuff is so awesome, and you don't get that at a day job. I pray everyone is blessed to have those moments with their creative journeys. It's better than money. And the money my other thing is, don't chase money. I've never chased money. Don't believe in money. Chase your passion, but give your all to it. Be a little mad about it, and be a little bit, let people question you. It's the best feeling, when you do make it, and it's a cool thing. It's a hard thing, but it's a cool thing, and keeping your mind opened and looking at the industry now, like you're doing, and hopefully I'm trying to do, navigate this thing. It's cool to have that with production now. It's cool to have that with printers now. It's cool to have that, like, how do we reach this audience now? And it's a whole new like bear to tackle, and I'm up for that, whatever that looks like. Absolutely.
Man, I got like 10 follow-up questions, and I don't even know which one to go with first. I'm gonna ruminate on it for a little bit. And JW's got a question for you. Says, how did Hickman and PITARRA find each other?
That's a cool story. So Hickman, there was some early contests in 2006. I think in 2007. One was a Wildstorm talent search, and you had to fly either to Philadelphia or LA to drop your portfolio off. So I did 3 pages for a Wildstorm talent search. They were going to pick one guy, but they picked 5 guys. All of them became published guys. They were all really good, and I was one of the 5. We had to go back home and do another contest, and I thought they're going to get right back to us. They took like 6 months. It wasn't really on their agenda to get to it. Ended up losing that one. Next year, they had Comic Book Idol 3 on Comic Book Resources, which wasn't a TV show. It was just a message board. But pretty much everyone in comics that wanted to break in at the time submitted their portfolios on a message board. There was 211 of us, I think. And they were going to pick 10 contestants to draw against each other, and you were going to vote online. It was pretty early in the social media days, so people could like try to get your office to vote on you and stuff like that. But I knew my stuff was getting traction from the Wildstorm search, and I knew my stuff was really detailed and strange. And it still is to this day. It's very idiosyncratic and weird, kind of ugly, but mechanically correct. And there's some kind of juxtaposition that people like. So I thought when I submitted, I was like, my stuff is way different than these guys, and I'm the oddball out, and I bet I get picked. And I did. I was one of the 10. And so for 5 weeks, they were going to vote 2 people off a week or something like that. Or maybe it was 10 weeks and 1 a week. But it was like Ryan Otley was a guest judge. C.B. Sobolski was a guest judge. And if you made it all the way to the end, you got a published pin up in like an image book. So I enter this. That's the when I said we were doing 3 or 4 pages a week out of nowhere, that was it. I was waiting tables at the time, got people to cover my shifts, stayed up all night, took Adderall, whatever it took to get the pages done. excuse me. And then I lost and I got voted off. And I was like number 5, I was 5th. And I was not mad at all because I was so tired and I knew I'd done everything I could. And when I got voted off, well, I guess there was an Invincible sequence where Invincible's flying on the opening page. The script says he's having fun, and then he sees a bad guy on the ground and he goes down and fights the bad guy. I do that page, but I don't stick to the script when I work. It's just not what I do. So when I read the script, I take the essence of it and it says he's having fun. So I thought it'd be super funny if he's flying and he's chasing ducks, like ducks in a row. Mm-hmm. And because when he stops in the air, if he's all the way up in the sky, there's nothing visually to show he stopped other than his body language. But if he stopped and a bird hit his back, then when he goes down, you would see visually the gag. Then with my page, he beat the bad guy, and then he had the bad guy in his arms, but he stuck his foot out at the end and caught the duck that had hit in the sky at the beginning of the page. So I completely went off script, but also he stopped in the sky. There was a sight gag that I added, so I got voted off. It was what it was. But anyway, I felt good. I took a walk to the comic shop after I got voted off. I came back to my house and I had an email from Marvel, and Marvel's like, hey, would you like to work on a Mojo story? And I was like, what? And then I was like, how'd you hear about me? And I thought maybe it was a contest. They're like, this new writer, Jonathan Hickman, saw your stuff online and recommended you, and we saw it and we dig it. So this guy Hickman wants to work with you. And Hickman hadn't done really anything at the time. He did the nightly news. And so I went back to the comic shop, picked up the nightly news. I asked the editor, John Barber, for the number of Jonathan. So I call and thank him because I thought I was going for a pinup in an image book for all this work. And now I'm going to get to work at Marvel at 25 years old. And I was like, this is amazing. So I called him and said, man, this changes my life. You don't know how hard I've worked for this for the last 7 years. And I worked hard, man. Like my buddy was going to Kubert school. I went and lived up there and did the assignments. I couldn't afford it, but I did that. And then I would pull all-nighters and I would buy the drafting tables, buy the light boxes, buy the how-to books. And I took it very seriously for about 7 years and really didn't get much traction until about 2006. And so Hickman's like, man, I love your stuff. You draw kind of like Seth Fisher and that Frank Quietly guy and Jeff Darrow. I love your influences, and we're going to do cool books together. And so then I go buy Nightly News, and I don't know if you know Hickman's self-published stuff, but it's all like pie charts and infographics.
Yeah,
and I was like, I thought this guy's going to draw like Mobius. I thought he's going to draw like Jeff Darrow. And I open it up and I'm like, the main character of this book is a pie chart. Like that's what I thought. But anyway, he's super cool and he's so well read. And man, he had a vision for his career. And he told me what he was going to do with his career and his 5-year plan. And he smashed it out of the park. Like he had these big goals. And I don't want to speak for him, but he was like, if you're a professional and you're consistent, and he came from the design background, you can do this, you can make this happen. And at the time, so I got that work, and then we had Manhattan Projects and another small book called Red Wing. It was supposed to be at Marvel, and I had a job offer for teaching, and it was about $50K a year. And he was like, don't take that job. Work on this book at Marvel with me. It was going to be Manhattan Projects under their Epic line. But then Marvel came back and I think wanted 1%. And Hickman's like, well, let's test the waters at Image with a smaller book, Red Wing. And we did. And it sold really well for a miniseries. And that was crazy because my advance on that was pencils and inks, $100 a page, right? Which was what it was. But the crazy part is I pass up $50,000 a year with retirement and benefits and healthcare for $100 a page. But
yeah, man, that's you investing in yourself, man. That's that belief you got to have in yourself. Without that, forget it. You're already lost.
Yeah, and I was just going to do it. I was going to take my swing, and I took the biggest swing I could, and I've always tried to do that. And I don't let money's a trick, money's a great thing. You need it to keep the lights on. But man, you don't want to be that donkey with a carrot being dragged around everywhere either. If you got a vision for what you want, do the work, and that it will pay you back eventually. If you go through with it, if you pick yourself back up like your intro, you're going to get knocked down. It's not going to happen the way you think. It definitely is not going to happen the way you think. But if you keep putting into the craft and dedicating yourself and get better, people aren't going to hold you back, man. If I see a kid that keeps coming back to my studio and wants help or keeps hustling, it doesn't mean you're going to give it to them before they're ready. But when they're ready, I'm going to be rooting for you. And just like you said earlier with someone submitting to you, I know that means everything to you in the moment. I know that's the most important page you've ever drawn. But look at your career like a journey. If Pete sees your stuff and he knows you come back in a year and you've gotten better, and then in 2 years you get the gig that gets you the next gig that you're going to get, you look at it like a journey, and it gets you out of that like manic artist. I can't believe they haven't responded to that email. I can't believe that. Look at that and laugh, man. Or you feel rejected. No one's going to reject you if you're drawn like Olivier Coipel. No one's going to reject you if you're drawn like Fiona Staples. No one's going to reject you if you're drawn like Jeff Darrow. But you got to get there. You got to do the work, and that's a hard pill to swallow, But it's not, because the journey's so fun if you love the stuff. So
absolutely, yeah. All the rejection is, all that no is, in that momentary space of and time is basically a yes. It's a yes for other things. It's a yes to maybe go to another publisher, work on what you're doing, pursue a different path with what you're trying to achieve. They're all yeses that are there. If anything, the no is such a short amount of time. It's so easy to get over once you have your perspective in a different space. But sometimes people see that and they almost put like a morality upon that no. Of that, now that no equals I'm a bad person, I'm bad at what I do, I'm never going to succeed. Like there's all these things, and people really get down on themselves about it instead of looking at that and just going, okay, it's no for now, and the yes is down the road, and maybe this thing is going to lead me to somewhere even better than if this person had said yes at this point in time. But it's really important to have that sense of perspective on it, because that's what's going to, I think, make you succeed in the long term. But you got to have that belief. You got to have that belief in yourself. If you don't have that belief in yourself, if you think that you can't do it, if you think that you've already lost, if you think what's the point, if you've got a defeatist attitude when it comes to that kind of stuff, no one can convince you otherwise. You're gonna be your own worst enemy. So you really got to put that belief in yourself first.
You can do it. Just flip it, man. I remember, and this is funny because it rounds out, but I remember early on, CrossGen was a pretty big company in the early 2000s, and they were paying well, and I showed my portfolio to a lot of people and was getting good responses. But I went to Bart Sears at CrossGen, and he flipped through my pages, and remember, I was doing 4 or 5 pages in 6 months, and he said, draw 200 more pages before you show your work to anyone else. And I was like, that killed me, right? I was like, 200 more pages, that's in 2020 for me at the time, like this is gonna take forever. But man, I just used that as fuel. I was like, all right, I'm going to prove him wrong. But here's the deal. By the time I was ready to break in 5 years later, I might not have drawn 200 pages, but I definitely redrawn 100 pages 3 times. You know what I mean? He was right.
Yeah.
And so like, if you would have saw me when I was ready, I don't think he was telling me no because he was wrong. But sometimes if you get told no, you got to flip it and use it as fuel. But that doesn't mean that doesn't mean Peter or I or whoever's rejecting you is wrong either. But you got to use it, and don't take no. Like, make it hard. I would say make it hard to say no. Meaning that if you submit to Alterna and they reject your stuff, and then you come back a year later with new stuff, and then the second year it's even better and new stuff, He's not going to be like, nah, I just don't like you. You're pestering me. He's going to be like, look at this guy's work ethic. And like all of that comes into publishing. Look at this guy's persistence. I'm going to get this guy now before the next guy snags him up. And the second this is what you'll realize too, the second you're ready to be published, all those doors start opening pretty quick. It's not like one guy's doing you a favor. It's that you're wanted now. You've put yourself at a level where those doors start opening, and you're going to get the choice of gigs, or you're going to get, you're going to be starting a gig and another gig might come on.
The tables turn now. You're saying no because you just don't have enough time. You got so much work in front of you.
Yeah. So like that persistence is big, but I got to listen to that. I've always been persistent in that way, but my thing is I get bogged down with I want to be a great cartoonist, and then I start drawing pages, gigantic little details, and then people start knowing you for the details. So when you get a cover gig, it's like do one of these giant cityscapes. I'm like, no one ever just asked me to draw a face. You know, it's like, it's got to be a city falling apart. Or it's got to be 100 bad guys. And I'm just like, every time I kind of know what people expect now. And then I'm like, man, I got to try to outdo myself. And the one cool thing about John was I got to put breathing room for the first time in my work. I got to pace out if it was just a headshot or just a landscape. And that was cool because I'm giving myself the assignment as a writer. I just had to make sure I was earning those beats, you know?
Yeah, the storytelling is king. You know, you can have a really nice image or a nice series of images, but if the story's not being told clearly and in an effective way, especially in a way that packs an emotional punch, you're not going to have that story resonate the way you want it to. And that's what it's all about, is that resonance.
Yeah.
So we got
read some chats. Let's do it.
Yeah. We got Maddock here. It says, and thank you for the super chat, Maddock. Says, don't know if you guys realize how important and inspiring this is. Oh, I'm glad to hear that, man. It says, Manhattan Projects was an absolute highlight of my comic collecting career. Style fit perfectly.
That's awesome to hear. It's I can look at those pages now, and they're so much worse than what I am now. But I am very proud of them, man. It was a monthly gig, and it was the first time I was really attacking monthly. And we had some fill-ins here and there, and towards the end we had delays. But those first 20 issues, me and Hickman kind of plotted out. We would meet up for coffee in South Carolina, and we would just sit down and talk about what was going to happen. And then to work on it for 3 or 4 years and get to those beats was so cool. And I felt like we had such juice on that early on. Like before we got nominated for the Eisner, I called Hickman. I was like, dude, I think we're going to get nominated for a freaking Eisner. And I was right, you know. And then we ended up making the New York Times bestseller list 4 times with it, which was super cool. And I get good residuals to this day on it. It's freaking amazing. Like if you can get a hit book and you own it, you know, the money becomes really good. But yeah, man, I know it was a lot of people's favorite book at the time. I wish we could go back to it and tell a solid ending. We kind of went to a mini series format and it kind of tapered off. Maybe one day, you know, we've had a bunch of media people interested in it over the years. But nothing ever really materialized. And Hickman always said, if any of that's ever announced, he wants it to be solid, like it's moving forward, not just signing the rights, but actually going into production. Then we would come back and finish it off. But right now, I'm just so interested in Axe Wielder and building that out that it's in the back of my mind if that ever happened. It's something that I love that series, and I loved working with John. It's the one thing I would definitely go back to if that opportunity ever did come along and it was the right timing.
So with your series, Axe Wielder John, what's been the most difficult aspect of this for you in terms of not just the creative, but in terms of the logistic?
I would say none of it has been overly difficult. It's never been as difficult as I thought in my head, but it has been very difficult. Money management is tough. That's the toughest for me because I pay better rates than the big two, but I was doing that before I made any money on it. And then after the campaign was done, it had a good number, 200K. Well, then all of a sudden the rates felt even higher. You know, like when I reach out to people, they're all worth it. I wish I could pay them more, so I'm not complaining about that. But I've been bad about spending the money I get. Like even like I was showing this action figure off. We're gonna do this 7-point of articulation, you know, wow, crazy action figure. But the readership isn't there yet. But even just 2 of those figures cost $5K to get produced.
Wow,
and,
man.
And to produce. To produce the minimum run of 3,000, it's going to cost about $70K for the machining of the parts, dealing with China and all that. So I'm already rolling that money somewhere else. I'm just bad with money management. But man, it's tough. Like waiting on printers is tough. Waiting on your line in printers, remembering the stuff that you're picking out. You're picking out paper stock, and you want it to match the next book, and making sure the typeface is going to fit when it says book 3 or book 1 or book 2. Managing all the creatives, you know, like making sure they're getting their work in. That's a tough thing, man. Like even if you do give them more than their Marvel rate, it doesn't mean they're going to get it in time, and that might mean they go slower because you're paying them more. And you're going to realize you got to put your production hat on, your publisher hat, and that's where like some guys are like carrot on a stick, And I hate saying that, but they're like, if we got a guy who's going to letter the pages, he'll letter them right now if he got the money. But if you paid him all the money up front, he might not letter them as fast, you know? And I was bad about giving everyone all the money early, you know? But I think it just doesn't make sense to do that. You really need to say, turn in a couple pages or give them a couple hundred to start, so you're not, as a publisher, so much in the hole. And try to manage that out and work that out. And sometimes I would just run out of money. I'd have to go sell some art or something to like get the designer going. But so many guys everyone I worked with was awesome, but I didn't really have a good system. And then I think another thing, this is a small thing, but like there's like 500 ways to pay people. And I think as a publisher, you need to say you're being paid through X and that's it. Because like otherwise you're having open Zelle accounts, PayPal accounts, Weiss accounts, direct wire transfers, because I'm working with guys in Spain. And I'm like, dude, it's spending me. I'm trying to figure out how to get you all the money, you know. And that, like
Western Union is the bane of my existence,
dude. So many, and everyone has their own way. Every country has their own way. And then sometimes, and I'm not fussing at the guys, but they'll be like, the fees are higher than PayPal. I'm like, I will send you $4 more to get you going. You know, like I don't care about the $4, you know. But like little stuff like that, like you got to think about. But then also like, it's cool. It's cool to learn people. It's cool to learn habits. It's cool. It gives you a big perspective on what a jerk you've been as a creative when you don't respond to an email, you know, because when I'm not getting that email as the publisher hat on, I'm like, what's going on? You know, but then I know I've done it 50 times on my own when I've been behind. I stay in a hole and I'm just going to blow them away with a better piece of art, even though I'm a little late. And I'm like, that's just not the way to do it. You got to be upfront, and this line of communication is so important, and that's so valuable. And you start realizing the real value of the people that are persistent and do get their work in. They become invaluable, because if someone else isn't reliable, even if they're the best of the best of the best, if the work's not coming in, the book's not coming out, you know? And if you promise the book, you're going to be late if it's not there. And that was tough. Like, I drew the pages really large. They were about 3 foot tall and 18 inches wide, 33 inches tall.
Holy smokes.
Every panel in Axe Wielder is its own 11 by 17 board. So the 3-tier panels were 3 boards. But that caused the flatter to be like...
What's the stack like?
Oh, the stack was sick. The stack was so proud. I was so proud of the stack. The stack was awesome. But when I did that, the flatter, when I scanned it in, and I don't spot black, so when the flatter's flatting it, they're having to go around, and she said she was down to 1 pixel on her pen, like tracing my lines. So I'm breaking her mind, and then those detailed flats are going over to my colorist, and I'm breaking him. Even if I am paying a little more than Marvel, he's having to do three or four times the work because I just drew everything so large. So that the coloring in that side of it snagged, and then trying to find help that could match was tough. And really the thing is going to be more lead time for me, because that was going to be the answer, because we ended up going through 6 colorists. I ended up having to start coloring it myself to get it finished, and it was just tough, man. But all these things can happen, like the printer during COVID had problems, or waiting on one, you know, the letterer needed to move one period, that we had a period literally it said the end period. We're like, get rid of that period. The letterer's computer crashed, and I believe it did, and he could not access that file. So we're trying to go to other letterers to match the typeface. He didn't have the custom typeface to give to them because it was on his computer. And now we're like, what do we do? You know, like this, you know, and like things like that that could hold up production for a week, you know, and it's just a huge pain. Like, I'm having to reach out to people and figure this out, and everyone has their problems, and then you got your own personal life problems too. And then the other thing is, it's why I brought in my editor, Chris Stevens, who's won some Eisners, and I have another buddy, Spencer Clausen, who's really good with story, and we could just call on the phone and kick stuff back and forth, is being answerable to people when you are doing this on your own. You know, I know we can answer to the fans once we crowdfund and the book is due, but before that, you really want to get some work done, but there's not a real deadline, you know? Like right now, book 2 is about a year away for me to really finish drawing it. It's even bigger than book 1. But I've got to stay on time now, so I'm not screwing future Nick in the future. And that's what bringing in an editor did for me. And, you know, learning these kind of things and knowing yourself well enough to get out of your own way in spots. You know, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot, but there's not a part of it I don't love. You know, there's not a part I don't love. But
oh yeah,
it's all been fun, pulling your hair out sometimes. blowing up on other creators. I don't do that too much, but my editor, me and him have a pretty good ball busting rapport. So we said we're like brothers, we'll hug it out. But we've had 2 or 3 where we're just like, he's getting at me or I'm getting at him, and it's a blast. But like, you got to be able to laugh it off, you know, and just keep going. And we're making comics at the end of the day, and that always go back to that. And that's living a dream, you know, like something you thought you really not even think you could do as a kid, but you're getting to draw in these floppy books, man. You're getting to make these stories that you read as a kid, like we're playing with house money, you know, like nothing's that big to worry about. But also, we got to be adults about this and get our stuff done too, so that you go back and forth. But I never take it, you know, I it's my lifestyle, so I do take it home, but I never take it home. I never go sit down with my wife and watch TV and I'm like, I'm so mad. That's maybe happened 2 or 3 times since I've known her in 9 years. But because really, man, it's house money. Like, once you get ahead, like the ability to draw for me, it isn't done. I want to keep getting better, but I know I draw at a publishable level. That work's done. My wife talks about this too. Her ability to write is done. So now the work in the platform to get it out there is building. So I've got everything in place I've ever wanted with a dream job that I've always, you know, couldn't ever imagine I would have. And then, so at the end of the day, these little hiccups, they don't destroy me, you know, like it's just
that's
just
very
a roadblock.
important.
Yeah.
You got to have that mentality there. You got to have that attitude. It's so important. And it's something that you develop over time, but I think some people, again, they don't give themselves enough time. They're not patient with themselves enough. And it's a tendency, I think, that we can go down, but we really got to work a lot on that, because there are going to be things like what you're talking about. You're turning these problems that are coming your way, and you're putting the same creativity you put into your storytelling. You're putting those creative juices going towards those problems to solve those, you know. And as storytellers, we're both problem creators and problem solvers. It just depends like how long we want to prolong the solution of that problem to a maximum interesting effect.
What you said is so true, man. Even if I have to, like, I had to mail out that artwork and my art rep had pre-sold it and it was worth a lot, but I got to make the box for it. It's a creative assignment now. I got to make sure it's right. I got to do, and it's like, why is everything got to be tinkered with? Like you said, like the problems have become creative assignments, and it can always be done. Everything can always be done better. So that something I'm battling with as a publisher is letting go of some of that control, you know, like it's hard though. Like it's your name on it, you know, it's your thing. So it's a tough, that's something I don't know if I could ever do. A big reason why I wanted to get into publishing some comics was I kind of want to do it my way, you know? So it's like hard to let that go this early, but it is something. Bringing on the editor helps, you know, keeping a middleman between you and the bad answers you got to give people is cool too. You know, like I'm paying the editor to be the bad guy. You know what I mean? Like you tell them no. Like I would have done it, but Chris over there, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, if you're paying your editor to be a yes man for you, you're doing it the wrong way. And some people, I've seen that happen where they're like, I've been brought on board for this, that, and then I'm giving them back. I'm not even busting balls bad, you know. I'm just giving you back some. Okay, you know, you did this good, but you know, what were you thinking about when you did this here? I'm trying to understand, because I think if you could think about this in a different way, maybe you can get this point across more effectively. And it would be like, I must have just killed their firstborn with the response that you get back.
That's a huge thing. Like now that we're getting stories in, I love to workshop story. I'm like a story room kind of guy. Like everyone spit your ideas around, and so we can get these notes in for the creator. And you don't know how they're going to take it, man. Like some of them are like, this is their baby. They can't see it. And then, but the suggestions, I think if you put them to a poll, people could like universally agree that we could probably connect this. We could set up this payoff earlier on page 3 if we really want to hit that note and make it sing on this. And it's like, how do you communicate your notes is important. You know, how do you communicate your intent? And I think sometimes just getting on the phone call and explaining yourself is a lot better. Not that you can always do that, but if you're comfortable enough with the creator, and really set those expectations early and what I did was I have John as my thing. I workshop John. Like I hired an editor. I worked with my wife, who's a writer. I worked with 2 or 3 longtime readers that have read more comics than me, and I took their notes to heart. I didn't take them all, but if they made sense to the vision I had, I listened, and I worked diligently to get them in, and that was the only way I knew I could make it, that I made it readable and made it work. So I'm bringing that philosophy into Kuroshi, my brand, and I'm gonna, like, when someone turns something in, I love this book. I love the potential of this book, but how can we make it better? And we kind of had an agreement with the editor that the books come first, not the ego. Ego's got to come second, like,
Absolutely.
I had to redraw pages that I thought were incredible because it wasn't the right note, and if I'm doing it and I'm willing to do it and I'm drawing them 3 feet tall with the tiniest microns that exist, then you got to be willing to do it too, or just work on your story before you start drawing it, so we don't have that problem to begin with. But I don't want to be a hard ass and be like, make it more difficult for people to do it. But I really want them to, like, it's going to be on, your name is going to be on that book forever. And this is, especially if it's like an artist that's coming on to be a writer, be insecure early and be willing to listen and workshop, because I was, you're not going to be Brian K. Vaughan out the gate, you're going to have to read some how-to books.
Hell, Brian K. Vaughan's not Brian K. Vaughan out the gate.
Yeah. It's the same thing with that Michael Jordan thing, or lifting or bench pressing. You got to start, you aim high, but you got to be realistic, and then the high aim comes with, and maybe you need a little insecurity there, where I think sometimes artists will be like, well, I got a cool character, that's it. I don't think that's it. I think you actually got to make the story beats pay off, try to get some emotion in there, try to get some heart in there, and so it's not just this surface level thing. And I think what John had going for it is, people thought they were going to get a splatterfest with Axe Wielder, but there's a turning point in John where you see it's a book that's got a little more heart than that, and then people all of a sudden, they're like, that's when they like the book, and that was planned, man. I worked so hard to get that in. Even if it didn't hit for everybody, it hit for some, and that's what makes it not just a surface level barbarian book. There's something deeper under the surface bubbling, and it really had to do with me being a new father and having a sick kid and wanting to play with my action figures with my aesthetics that I like from this room. I always say, is this room, I built this room, I hung this stuff up on the wall, but did I build it, or is it informing and building me? Like, I don't know, because there's
a symbiotic thing that occurs.
Yeah. So anyway, that's some of my mindset. I can yap all day. This is how I'm a sheltered, shut-in artist, is when I finally get a mic on me, I just can't stop talking.
Hey, I'm just here to listen. I'm here to kind of guide the raging river as best as I can, and I'm more than happy for you to take the conversation wherever you want to go, man. It's been great. But to your point, there's something about when you're in the idea brainstorming phase, when you're being creative in that respect, that you need to have a sense of fearlessness and a little bit of detachment. Because if you're really just precious about your ideas, to the point that, and this can happen sometimes, you feel like you don't want to share them because you start getting a little insecure and you don't want anyone to kind of shoot them down or whatever it may be. I think you end up doing the overall story such a disservice. If you go in there instead, especially if you're kind of working with someone, whether it's an editor or a co-creator, whatever it may be, or the artist you have on the book, or the writer you're working with, if you're an artist, whatever that is, you never know the idea you put out there, even if that's not getting used right off the bat, and instead maybe there's someone, they hear it and they go, oh man, that makes me think maybe we could do it like this. And you'll never get that. And you'll never come to something even better because you were too afraid to share what you thought. And that is so sad to me when it comes to that. As I've seen that happen time and again with creative teams. But you got to get out of that space and get into that creatively.
I get goosebumps thinking about those moments where, oh, you mean like this? And then it's like this. And you're like me and you going back and forth. And it just feels right because you're dinging back and forth. But yeah, you got to tease that out sometimes. And there's like two things that come to mind here. Is that moment is so cool whenever you're like, oh, if we set that up here, we could pay it off here. But if I'm talking to you on the phone and we're both, riffing off each other, it might come off a lot easier than it cold being like, move this here. That might not read the way you want. The other part of that, something I realized is a lot of people have all these ideas for their world, because we could screen cap this picture right now and it's me and you talking, and that says a lot, but it's not saying what we're thinking, how you're guiding the conversation, how the mechanics are working in the room, what this drink tastes like. We only get in comics that one JPEG to show the whole world. And a lot of times the authors have a lot of world in their head that isn't on the page. Like I found that, like when you really talk to them, if they do start opening up, then it's like problem solving and puzzle solving. Well, how can we set these characters up in a better environment, better situation to work in some of that quiet exposition or whatever? And a lot of times it's setting or something, and then they can say something about the world that they think's inherent. And I had that problem with Axe Wielder. The main bad guy, Lord Fang, was not in book 1, and I had a buddy be like, dude, you never show the main bad guy. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not important. He's like, yeah, but it is important. It's the main bad guy. You need a scene with him in it. And I'm like, dude, obviously you need a scene with him in it. But I was too involved in the world that it wasn't, and it was there for me, but that doesn't mean that's what's coming out of the page into the reader's head. And I always battle with this. Do you want to be on the nose? You got to hide the exposition. I believe that strongly, show don't tell. But I do think sometimes a character needs to be put in a situation where they can come out and say it, like if there's only so much space and there's only so many JPEGs to use to flesh out this world that's so much richer than just the JPEG that we're drawing, maybe the words need to be, maybe the caption boxes need to be right. Maybe the words need to be right. Maybe we need to relook at a scene to get the two characters speaking honestly about exposition. And example I use from Axe Wielder is I have a new executioner and an old executioner. One's the new guy, one guy's retiring. So the new guy gets to ask, why is this way? And the other guy gets to answer. If it's two old executioners, guess what? They would not honestly have that conversation because they would both already know it, right? So just little small tricks, and those are folded out in every which way. You can answer, you don't have to say, am I pregnant, or you could just say, you could say the inverse of it. I mean, I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it's really important to be able, because I know the old adage is show, don't tell, but I love show and tell, but I don't like redundancy. So if you're showing and telling the same exact thing, I don't like that. But if you're showing and you have some kind of juxtaposition that's occurring within your exposition or within your dialogue or your captions, and it adds more context or parallel context to what's being shown, I love that. And that's a great way to tell stories. But the thing is, like you're talking about, there's always a way to put in situations, to put in characters that are there, to add something to a scene, to provide the context that's needed without just explaining it outright, and making it kind of a dull story because of that.
I agree with you 100%. Juxtaposition is king. Like right now, I got a script that we're tinkering with, and right now the internal monologue's good. It's kind of a detective story, but it's always what's happening in the panel. And I'm like, it'd be way cooler if this guy was thinking about 3 other different weird things. He would feel like a real person instead of saying the literal that you're getting from the visuals, And then he can call back in his own head, and do all kinds of fun stuff. And you're getting a layered person, just like I'm saying the words I'm saying now, but I'm thinking my wife wants to watch Shogun in 45 minutes, you know what I mean? Like there's more in our head than what's the literal. And really the coolest thing about writing is when you get the images and they don't line up with the words. And like an example is like, I thought the book Red Rooster did this. It kind of taught me a lesson when I read the first issue of Red Rooster. No, not Red. Was it Red Rooster? Was that the Brett Weiser book?
Oh yeah, Red Rooster.
Yeah. Something that the villains were doing when they were fighting is they weren't having a conversation directly, and I stole that for Axe Wielder, and I realized really great writers do this, and it's a small trick, but like in Axe Wielder, there's a new executioner, and before we see him, one guy's giving the old executioner a hard time, and he's like, "Did you give him his nickname yet? Is a new executioner nickname? Make it a good one, And then when you see him, the new executioner's like fiddling around with a device, and the old executioner's telling him what to do, and he's reprimanding him for doing things wrong. And then the new executioner looks at him and goes, "Just don't fuck me on my nickname today," you know. And that's like percolating in his mind, and we set it up early, but he's not answering what the guy's asking him. He's answering what's on his mind, and you're putting a mind into the characters, and you start realizing, even when me and you are talking, you might just sway one way, but it's not literally what I was saying, or you might push me one way, but it's not exactly what I was thinking, or vice versa. We have our own internal thoughts, and when you can get those a little offline, and people are talking at each other instead of directly, ping-ponging the literal back and forth, you get really interesting conversations brewing. And I think that the word is juxtaposition, whether it be the art and the words, or back and forth. There's a lack of a bad listening might be the short answer of that. Make your characters bad listeners, and they start coming to life.
Yeah, because otherwise it feels like they're reading the script.
Correct.
Like they already know what the other character's going to say before they say it. And then when they deliver this, eloquent sort of thing that doesn't seem like they're either in mid-thought with something else, or they were going to respond to something that they thought the character was going to say. There's so many different ways to get into it when it comes to dialogue, especially for certain characters. And then when you have all these characters that are kind of approaching a conversation in a different way, then you really start to have something that feels fleshed out and real, as opposed to they all have the same voice. I think that's something that a lot of writers are always asking about too when they're just starting off, is how do you make characters feel like they have a different, unique voice? And that's one of the biggest things, is that they have a different approach to not just their reactions, but also how are they approaching within a conversation, beginning or ending conversations. What is their tone like? What is their are they more serious with this conversation? Do they not take anything serious? How are they interacting with each other? It's like how a good actor, there's good actors, but there's great actors that are great reactors, and you could tell that then they make those around them even better because they're so good with their reactions.
It's really interesting when you start getting into the thoughts of your characters, or our core. What's our core engine in our what's that thing in our heart that pushes us? And I've got a cousin who's awesome. She's the most amazing woman you've ever met. Super successful, super beautiful. But I know quietly, whenever she gets tipsy at night, she's more on the insecure side. You would never know it by knowing her, but she's broken down before. And I'm like, oh, you're super successful because you're scared of not being successful. You're super this because you're not this. And it's always interesting when you're examining people to find that core that drives them, and I'm sure mine, we get riddled with insecurities too. I'm one to talk, but
oh yeah,
it's like doing that. And something that's really cool.
Actually,
too,
I don't mean that in that way. I'm agreeing with you, not saying that you are riddled.
No. I mean, we all are, but like what we do with that and how it manifests on the outward, on what we're drawing, isn't necessarily what's in the core of the character. Something that just a tip is screenplay writing with dialogue is something to look into. There's a lot of like Film Courage and a lot of YouTube channels that really break down and dissect how not to do the literal exposition and stuff, and set the scenes up in different ways, because film has some limitations that comics have too. We don't get all the pros to get into the people's heads and know what they're thinking. You can with caption boxes a little bit, but not actually as much. But
I love thought balloons. I use them in my comics.
Yeah, thought balloons are cool.
Because you can get that contradiction occurring. I love when the character is doing or saying something and then their thoughts are contradicting what's happening. You get a little bit more of that insight where you're like, oh man, okay.
I don't know if this is correct, but my wife writes prose. She's a mystery novelist, and it's like we always talk about that. Whenever she's writing literal dialogue, she gets to think with the characters, and I'm like, it's never the same unless the action's tense. I don't know if that's a truth, but if the action's intent, if you got a gun in my face, I'm not going to be thinking about the flowers I smelled yesterday per se. But
you're just reacting,
you're reacting. Like I think it synchronizes as the action. I don't know if this is a truth, but right now I'm feeling like this might be a halfway truth. As the action heightens, you're probably floating a little less with your mind.
Oh yeah. Well, that's why, I mean, there's a quote from Bruce Lee about how martial arts is honestly expressing yourself, and it's because of the fact that you're in the moment and you don't have time to think. So you're just reacting, you're just feeling, you're just going with it, with the flow, and you're expressing yourself in that moment. And you don't have that, do I put on airs? Do I come up with the right way to do this? Do I think about technique? Do I think about, how do I come across in this way? You're just there.
Yeah.
And when you're present and in that moment, in that action, in that intensity of that scene, that's when you get to really know people, you get to know characters, you get to know what is important. It's the kind of like the fight or flight kicks in, So if something were to happen to you, do you just run away and leave your wife and kids there, or do you protect? Do you go in front? Do you, does that take over? And sometimes you don't. Sometimes I don't even think most people know. I think they maybe even think what they would do, but when confronted with that scene in the moment, what do you do? And
Yeah.
that's a big moment for a character.
That's a big moment for a character, big moment for a person. We daydream about that. I always daydreamed when I lived in a 2-story house that if anyone ever broke in, I'd grab about 6 omnibuses and drop it on their fucking head. You know what I mean? And then when I'm getting interviewed, I just say, Madman and Hellboy Library Edition killed that guy, not me. Do you think about your cool lines? But when that moment actually happens, and let's say a gun's pulled on you or something, and you're quickly cowering to the back of the liquor store looking for the exit, you're not the hero you thought you were. It's so weird because, like you said, putting on airs and these daydreams we have, but you find out a lot in those fight or flight moments, and a lot of those answers you might not like about yourself. That's a really interesting thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We got some great questions here in the chat. I've got them starred. How much time do you have left? I want to know where we're at with that.
I think we're good. 30
Can you
minutes
do
at least, an hour.
Okay, I was thinking like 12 more minutes, so we do an hour and a half.
Oh, sure. 12's great. That's
Okay.
more. That's less than enough. We can go 30 if you want.
Okay.
As long as we don't get stale. As long as you think we're doing good. If we get
I
stale,
don't
you just pull
think
the
that's
plug,
possible, Nick. I think we could do 3 or 4 hours, and we're not going to do 3 or 4 hours. I don't think we're going to grow stale. Metatron wants to know here, what type of pencil, ink, pens, brushes do you use?
I use zeros. So I've used every type of pen. I've been all over the world and bought pens. Went to Japan and got them all. I used to use a Muro dip pen. It's like MAMUARO or something. You can find them. The G pen. But on Axe Wheeler specifically, I had experimented so much, I wanted to refine my process, and I only used the 003 micron and the 005 micron, and that was it. I was going to give myself limitations. Only 3-panel grids, only this, because I knew I needed to be productive, and I couldn't just noodle away with different things. But my favorite dip pens are like the Hunt 107, the Maru, and I think it's like MAURU. It's a great, fine little dip pen. I'll use the mechanical pencil color Inu. It's color COLOR, Inu ENO, and I go to jet pens, and there's a light blue, but all of them are mechanical and erasable, and they're really great to sketch with. That's one of my favorite things. I use Strathmore 500 paper. That's 100% cotton. If you get it pressed, you get the slick. It's super slick. It's the slickest you can get, or you can get the vellum. For Axe Wielder 1, I used vellum. For Axe Wielder 2, I got like unannounced, but I'm getting my own imprint at a publisher, and I'm using their paper, and it's slick now, so I'm using that. So can't say which publisher yet, but yeah, the soft covers are going to come out, in the bigger mainstream at some point, a couple years down the line. So Axe Wielder 2, I'm using smooth again, but I like that paper a lot. I wouldn't go less than 400. 300 starts feeling a little less than to me, but I'm very mechanical with my approach. I'm using little pins. I can just see the texture on the page as I'm working, so I don't know, I'm very particular. The thing I started doing was I do my roughs, small little thumbnails. I don't know if I have any here. These might just be old sketchbooks, but I'll do sometimes roughs. You can see like the blue pencil here. I'll show you some stuff. Hang on. Sometimes I'll just grab a pencil and figure out a rough like this. This is like the guy getting blown apart, and you can see this is like on really crappy paper. But there's that blue line behind him there, and then just a pin, and I just kind of figure out what I want out of a shot. And then what I'll do is I'll take a picture on my iPad, and here's one where John's going to get attacked by a bunch of, so John's like right here, and he's gotten in a fight, but all these bad guys are coming off the cliff to get him. But I'll do sketches like that. They're not great, but what I do is I don't feel like it's permanent, right? I'm just very loose with the blue line, and I just build the shapes, and then I draw, and I don't care if it's bad, because then I take a picture from my iPad and I'll use one layer and I'll just tighten it up. Then I put it on the final board when I have 3 panels, or really 1 panel at a time on John 1, where I just print it out, So I would do a panel a day for the whole book, Instead of a page a day, I did a panel a day, which was nice. But it also took me forever, so. But
what was the thought process behind that? Was it to get all the detail in?
I wanted to do no thinking on the page. On Manhattan projects, I did a lot of thinking on the page, a lot of the drawing and building on the page. When I printed out a John page, like once I do it on the iPad, I turn it to blue line, put it in Photoshop, print it on the board, and then I'm just inking. And I never had the time to just ink myself. I would always be drawing in the ink. And on John, I just wanted it to look really crisp. And perhaps it's a little more dead. Maybe the line's too dead. Maybe it's not as alive as that original sketch of that guy getting blown apart. But I think by the time it's all said and done, I'll see if I can find that shot. But yeah, so that shot when it's all colored up, that it's not far from what it was, it's and I think it kept a lot of it, having a good colorist helps. But it's kind of, whatever. But I want it to be mechanical and clean. I didn't want any happy accidents. And I know that that's a death note for some art, but I'm a very technical artist, and I just wanted that time to sit down with, not feel like I was burdened by a full page, but I could really focus on the best illustration on the day. Not feel like I only got to do good on this corner, but I'm going to crap out these 3 in this corner, because I just got to make it look good. I wanted each one to feel important. So that was my mindset. And that's always been my process. Is generally my roughs weren't that tight. I would always do a rough, print it out blue line, and then ink it. But I would usually draw in the inks, go back with some blue pencil on the board. And really John 1, there's not a lot of blue pencil on the board. I use my blue pencils for my roughs, take a picture on the iPad Pro, go into Procreate, tighten it up one more time, tweak the perspective, print it out, ink it, and do a page a day, or which really a panel a day. But by the end of the week, I'm getting 2.5 pages a week. At the end of the year, if you hit that deadline, you've got a 100-page graphic novel at least. So it just depends on if you can stay consistent.
Did you find it easier for you to work in that capacity when you're working larger like that? You're almost making each panel like a splash page.
Yeah, I thought it was easier because it was so much less daunting, like it's just only a panel. I only got to do a panel. It was a whole page, but it was a whole page of real estate, but it was only a panel. And it made me think about negative space a lot. And usually my work was very stuffy and very Jeff Darrow-y. And now I was picking shots that just breathed a lot more. And I'll give you a couple of, like here, this shot with an opening shot of John, there's a lot of negative space. And I would just go in and focus in on like the beard details or whatever I wanted out of it. But I would usually never keep all this white space up here. But it just made me think a lot more about the negative value. And I started thinking about music theory a lot. If I'm just drumming the whole time, you kind of need the juxtaposition again of the quiet moment.
Yeah, it's the notes you don't play.
The notes you don't play. And for the first time, I was applying it to my art, If you want the big impact with 1,000 characters to matter, it's a crescendo to get there. It's not 1,000 characters throughout the thing. It's 1 or 2 that try to ambush him. Then he turns around and 4 or 5. Then 100 come down. And then 1,000 are at him. And then it just feels like it's building. But if it's just 1,000 the whole time, you don't have the juxtaposition or the resting place to feel the impact of the moments. And I really reflected on my approach to drawing, my approach to storytelling, everything with John. And it became new again, which was really cool,
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I got to ask you something. When it comes to drawing the face of Axe Wielder John, am I reading something wrong in terms of how when he's got like that scar across and it's cut through his mouth, but yet his teeth are there? Was that how did he get that without missing teeth?
Well, later on, I'll show you in a later volume. I'll show you. We focus how he loses his face. But a big problem, if you know anything about anatomy, is he would have a gaping hole where his nasal patches was. But if you've ever seen a character with missing their nose, it's completely disgusting. So I was not going to have a giant, and I'm sorry if you don't have a nose, but I didn't want like a big open booger hole on my character. So when like I got Frank Quietly recently to do a cover, Jeff Darrow's going to do a cover, I got a few guys doing covers for me. I always say, I know I drew it wrong, but I got to make this thing marketable. And what I'm going to have him do is his face is going to get hit by this monster that is a main character, and it's like going to bubble up, and it's going to be like kind of poisonous, and he's going to take his face, and there's going to be like a torch, and he's going to like burn it and like Carter it, like give it.
That's great.
But there's moments in John too where, like, does he have lips or not lips? And that's an interesting thing, because there's moments when I need him to emote, because he's like here's a shot of John here, and I need to hit like this sweet moment, and if he's got that booger hole and I can't have the lips are exposed and he's just like this and has got a booger hole, I'm not going to hit those emotional notes, and I knew that right away. And the idea behind the scar was he, like Pastoras doesn't have lips, you know, like you can see there's no closing lips over that gum line, you know, that he just kind of artistic take on that. That was the painter who did it. But the idea was there's something that happens in the book where John gets taken down a peg. He's not quite the guy he thought he was. And I always thought the symbol of masculinity was a big mustache. So I was like, let me cut his mustache in half. And I was like, man, grow a pair, Nick. Take his whole face and cut it in half. But then I was like, man, I can't do the booger hole though. So then I was like, and then like no one else, since I'm drawing it wrong, no one else can really do the scar my way, right? Like, and there was a couple other things with the design of John, like swords have been done. Swords are cool. Axes never. Axes, we get the little gremlin with red hair and braids, you know? Oh, I'm the little troll man. Throw me around in Lord of the Rings. I was like, dude, I want a dude that represents the axe 100%. And I'm going to give him 100 axes. And he does in his cape. He's got like 80 axes hanging. And I want it to be so unapologetically awesome axe wielder, you know? And I was like, I'm going to claim that weapon for my guy, you know? And that was an idea. I don't know if it's going to come across or not, but it's going to be hard for the next guy to go with 101 axes and a scar. Like, I kind of own the scar, and I don't know if I own the axe. There's been a lot of cool axe wielding characters, but a lot of them were kind of gimpy, and I don't like it. So
straight from the heart. I like it. I got a question here from JW. There's two questions though, so I'm going to combine them into that. He says, "Where's the portion of the show where he shows the Frank Quietly axe wielder John?" And then also, where did the idea for the straight line rendering for shading come from?
Oh yeah, that's a really interesting thing. The straight line rendering for shading I had never done before. It's kind of this drop shadow technique. I don't know if I use it on this page here. Let me see if I can find anything. See if I got a giant board up here. I don't think I used it on this. Maybe a little bit. You will probably not. This probably won't pick up. But I did this. I'll show you the whole thing so I don't embarrass myself. But there's this giant connecting cover. It's actually some kind of wraparound, but it'll keep going. But it's just, that's half of it, and the other half is here.
Oh my lord.
Yeah, I'm bad about taping boards together. Something just went crazy. But there's going to be this big snake fight. But what I started doing, like if you look at the belly of that snake, you probably can't see it. It's almost like laying little hairs down under the surface of things. And I usually never indicate it, or like under this you can probably see here, under the neck of this snake, there's those vertical lines. I just thought it added a dimension. And since I was getting into coloring myself, I started putting the drop shadow down, and it kind of looked right. It kind of looked like it gave it an extra dimension, and it's in the book, but it's shrunk down so small I don't think you could ever see it. But like under this hand here, like there is some straight line drops coming like under that skull or down under that skull, and I put these zigzags here along form to show where the colorist should put the low light, but I would also do these straight drops, and you can see it kind of on the teeth too.
Yeah.
And or back in where that jaw recesses and you got the other one lopped over, there's some straight. I just saw some cartoonists doing it. My buddy Gary Brown did it, but he works in blacks. But I was like, I wonder what that would look like in clean line style. And I know it's like anti-clean line style to start indicating shade, but I don't know, like kind of, I was so mechanical working on it. I thought like, and my microns will dry out because they're so tiny. So when they got dried out, I would just kind of be loose for a little bit and just kind of hit it. And it kind of started shrink wrapping the art. To me, it started looking a little better. And I just like that effect, but it is really like freehand vertical lines. And I didn't know if anyone, I've never been asked that. And it's definitely an evolution in my art that happened on Axe Wielders. So that's a great question.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Looks great. I gotta ask you though, you dig into microns? I've tried microns my whole life and I've stopped because I break them all the time.
Pop the head of them. Yeah.
Do you ever try Unipin? I love Unipins.
Unipins I love. There's a Mitsubishi pin. It's also on Jet Pins. It's if you type PIN, that's a cheaper one. But yeah, the Unipin is great and the pin is great. For me, I just went, and I really hate the 003 micron, which is the smallest.
Oh my lord!
It's so dry, and that tip you can break so easy. But again, I was like giving myself rules, when I started this. I didn't want infinite. I wanted the best I could do with this singular product that I knew I could keep buying without it running out on one of these sites or something. So I just went back to the generic way that I broke in, which was with micron work. And but yeah, I've literally have bought every pin. I've got trash cans, like the big 55-gallon drum trash cans, full of pins. They were probably $3 a piece, and I've got like 2 of those in my garage because I can't bring myself, if I break a tip, to throw it away. I'm like, that's a new pin in there, So it just goes into the pin pit of hell that's in my garage. My wife's gonna kill me about. She's like, "What are you doing with these?" I don't know, but I can't throw them away. So
one day, it's like the box of cables. Everyone's there's gonna be a use for these one of these days. That's amazing. Let's see. Handsome Pelican says, "What about that Oilers hat?"
H-Town represent, baby. Yeah, I was born and raised in Houston, so Warren Moon, Ray Childress, Ernest Givens, Jeffries, Bruce Matthews. Before my time was Earl Campbell. But yeah, grew up, and then they left us, so now we got the Texans, which they haven't had much to root for until now, but now looks like they're getting it together. So,
are you still in Texas?
Yeah, I live in a small town called in Bulverde, Texas. It's about 30 minutes north of San Antonio. I used to live in so I moved to Austin for about 5 years, and then between Austin and San Antonio, there's a bunch of nice hill country area, and we lived in like Buda, and we lived closer to the Guadalupe River now, and so we get to float the rivers in the summer, spring break and stuff. And we ended up getting a house close by her parents when we had kids. And yeah, we live in a town called Bulverde, which is essentially North San Antonio, about 30 minutes north. We're out like in the suburbs at the beginning of it's called the front porch of the Texas Hill Country is where I live.
Oh, very nice. The only sport I follow is hockey. So I know your Dallas Stars are doing pretty good this year.
Oh man, see, I don't know anything about hockey, so we're going this way with this.
Yeah,
we're passing each other up.
I used to follow all of them, and then 1998 happened, and that's kind of where I stopped with a lot of them. And then I continued with hockey, playing it and also following it. But I used to follow baseball, football, basketball, and then I don't know, something about the 90s was great with sports in general.
Yeah, I used to be a big card collector. That's
Yeah.
how I got introduced to comics, because comics were in the card collecting shop.
Yep.
But yeah, for me, what keeps me going is gambling now, because one, I work from home and I'm not around any of my friends. But fantasy football leagues, man, that's like my love, dude. I love fantasy football. It's degenerate gambling. It's so super fun, and it makes every game worth watching, because you'll have like a scrub or a superstar on a scrub team, and all of a sudden a game you would have never watched. Now I know this dude averages 7.3 yards a route. Now I know, and I need like 6 more yards to beat some dude for a couple $100. And so my local friends in Houston, we have not that anyone cares about this. We have a fantasy football league, but we buy a draft board and we do an auction draft where we buy the players, and you only got so much salary, but we literally go for like 8 hours every season, and we get drunk and have a great time, and then we keep in touch by just obviously doing the get into a guy's chat room and just talk mad crap on each other, with horrible memes, and hopefully that chat never gets out, you know.
Oh my lord. A Comics for Life has a great question here. It says, who's been most influential in your storytelling approach?
Probably three people. I think number one is Naoki Urasawa, who did Pluto and 20th Century Boys. He's a manga artist, but he does this really cool decompressed storytelling that I love, where instead of just an American comic, sometimes you're limited space. So when somebody's mad, it's like on the nose they're mad, and they're literally screaming what they're saying, and then the other person is literally punching them but also talking. What Urasawa does is he says, son, you're dying, and then the kid looks down, and that's drawn, and then he looks to the side, and then he looks back up, and he says, oh, okay, and that decompressed storytelling for me is like, I believe it. I don't believe when Batman's throwing a punch that he's also giving me a paragraph. That moment happens like this. That timing's not true, and when timing's not true in comics for me, I don't follow the story anymore. It's just once the mechanics of the world break down, whether it be art or dishonest timing and dialogue, I'm really out. I'm very critical. So Urasawa does it well. Quietly does it really well with his timing and spatial recognition within the art. Like when someone's walking along a path, not only is it drawn well and it's got its own line of action, but also the timing when he's entering the next room as he's delivering that line is correct. And he's also aware of how to draw that room. So obviously Frank Quietly's huge for me. Approach to your career is Jeff Darrow with Shaolin Cowboy. It's so unapologetically Jeff, and he's just marching forward with it and doing his own thing. And he could work on any property, he really could, and he turns it down to make his own thing. And that's something I aspire to, not the storytelling approach, but the career approach. Yeah, I think Quietly, Urasawa, and then my favorite writer is Brian K. Vaughan, and I think what he does, which seems so effortless but is not effortless at all, is when a character speaks, you believe what they're saying. And the opening of Saga, you have a guy with a TV head who's making love to a woman with a TV head, but he has erectile dysfunction. And you're reading that and you believe in it, And he's doing that with one or two lines of dialogue that says something about that person so quickly and so effortlessly. But I promise you that's not effortless. And BKV is the man. It's a lot that goes into it, I think if it's storytelling, drawing, it's the integrity of the backgrounds, the consistency of the backgrounds, the ability for your characters to emote. And then if it's timing, it's Urasawa to decompress a little bit, at least for the big moments. And then, yeah, Brian K. Vaughan for the dialogue for me.
See, and JW wants to know, have you ever illustrated any of your wife's writing?
So I haven't. Actually, for the whole time I've known her career, she's had little successes, but she's never... there's like I guess the real answer is there is no way she would let me destroy her words with my art, if that makes sense. Like, she writes beautiful sentences and mysteries. Why would she tame... Prose has this... It's like whatever comes alive in the imagination.
Not even a cover for the book or anything?
Nah, they have like real professional book designers that do that. That's a whole different realm. But her success just happened recently. She actually landed a Big 5 deal. It's a major deal, and she sold in 11 countries. She's gotten advances on her book.
Wow, fantastic.
And she got the highest category you can get for an advance in America. She got that. It's freaking nuts. Like, but again, so much hardship. While every day she writes for 3 hours and she's never been paid a dime. And I every day I'm halfway lying to her, and I'm like, it's going to happen. There's no way it's not going to happen for 9 years. If there was a new class, if a local writer hit it big and they were going to read your manuscript, we would pay the $2,500 and do that. Little goals, little things. She'd get feedback and she'd listen to it. We workshop story every night, whether it be on that board with those cards behind me or her board with her cards, and we're talking about how to punch things up. Like, our whole life is storytelling, and she writes really beautifully, and I draw really crudely, so I don't think they're ever going to mix. But we're creative writing partners, I would say. She helped me with some twists and turns in John, and especially, her genre is man. She kills me when I say this. She hates it, but it's like man-hating, wine-drunk women murder mysteries. It's always like girl on a train or whatever is hot at the time. And I'm like, it's always the women are kind of drunk and they all hate men. And I was like, well, I'm glad. I'm so
Perfect
proud of
Lifetime movie fodder.
Yeah. But I'm so proud of her that she stuck with it, and she's 37 now, and she just now got these big things are happening, and it was a dam that built up, because you got to be undeniable at some point, and I think she had just reached a point where I think she's better than what's on the shelves, because I read some of the stuff that's in her genre, and she was just doing, it's kind of like that, she just hit that crest where, once you're drawing better than what's out there, everyone's gonna be coming to you. You're not gonna be worried about being told no. You're gonna be worried about telling people no, and I think it's been so rewarding for her to put that much time into it. And her sticking with it for so long, and then for that reward to actually manifest. It was so cool, because you don't know how it's going to happen for you, and I don't know how it was going to happen for her. And when I say you, I mean everyone out there. I didn't know how it was going to happen for me, but the only thing you can control is you got to keep going. You got to keep plowing forward. Consistency, perseverance, picking yourself back up, all that stuff is what's in your control, and it's so important. So yeah, I'm super proud of her, but she'll never let me draw her stuff.
So much of this is winning through attrition sometime, finding a way to be the last person standing, and just making sure that you've got that endurance to last, and that's a big part of it.
There's this selfishness about the AI thing right now, where it's like there's going to be young people. The selfish part is this: everyone's worried about AI taking over, but me, I'm like, I know just a lot of people that are on the fence. Well, maybe I can do comics, maybe I can't. There's going to be 20% that are going to throw their hands up and be like, what's the point? Because AI is going to take it over anyway. To me, you just killed 20% of my competition, because I ain't going to let it kill me. I ain't going to let it kill me. I'm going to keep marching forward. I'm going to say hand-drawn
push
comic.
harder.
Yeah, I'm going to push harder because of it. But there are going to be people that are going to be like, what's the point? Or even with my kids love to draw, but if they know they can click a couple buttons and get an original piece of art, are they ever going to learn that craft that I learned? And I think that's scary, but as far as my immediate career, I'm not concerned about it at all. If someone wants to use it. It doesn't bother me, but I know I'm working on, it makes me even more excited to work on my own brand, because you can only get my brand from me, and I think that's a cool thing,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thirst for War says, no questions for Nick, but Lord Fang.
Lord Fang, man. Yeah, Lord Fang's crazy. Lord Fang's the main bad guy in Axe Wielder. He's this giant kind of, I don't know what he looks like, but some people say he looks like a vagina monster. But he's this kind of like super cool giant.
Definitely got a kaiju thing going on.
Yeah, he's really big, and I really like that he's got these spiders for eyes. So in his eye sockets there, those are like black widows, and as they move around, he looks. So he's just this kind of over the top, hooded, disgusting thing. We'll just leave it at that. So he's going to be obviously he's the main bad guy, but he was kind of my take on an over the top Skeletor. So the spiders for eyes are really cool.
Very nice. It reminds me of something that would fit perfectly in a book we have at Alterna called Blood Realm. I don't know if you're familiar with Blood Realm. It'd be right up your alley.
Oh, I got to check it out. I've not read Blood Realm, so that sounds awesome though.
Oh my lord, yeah. It's Rob Geronimo is the creator, writer, artist behind it, and he's doing a crowdfunder right now on Indiegogo for issues 15 to 18, and 15 to 18, and when I was reading Axe Wielder John, I'm like, this guy could fit in the land of Mordrin, which is in Blood Realm. It's a brutal story. It's really dark, intense, and the characters, visually especially, I think would be right up your alley. So give it a try if you get a chance.
I'll definitely check it out, dude. I'll definitely order it. Can you order the early stuff or no?
Oh yeah. If you go to alternacomics.com, you can order. I think it's issues 1 through 13 that we have now. 14 is in pre-order phase. That'll be out in like a month or so. And the pre-order, the crowdfunder, is for 15 to 18 on Indiegogo. But
dude, how do you manage all these projects, dude? That seems like so much work to me.
It's the craziest plate spinning act I've ever done in my life. Been doing it for 18 years, so I'm getting better at it. But I'm also distilling a lot of what I publish now, whereas before it was a little bit more. I was a little more lenient on certain things where I'm like, yeah, that looks okay. I think maybe someone will like it. Now it's turning more into, well, what's the mentality of this creator like? What's their production schedule and consistency like? Like all these different factors that now I feel I'm comfortable with determining and demanding, because I've been doing this a lot longer. Whereas in the beginning, it was like, who the hell am I to say, you got to have all of that? And I wasn't really confident with myself and wasn't really sure about what I should look for even. It was just more like, yeah, it looks like a good book. These people seem like they're into it. And I've seen over the years where sometimes talent and ability will only take you so far. If that mentality isn't there, everything starts unraveling. So that's a big determining factor now, and I have more of like an interview process with people that I do bring on. But now it's more like a focus on like 7 or 8 books and sticking to that and building up around it, as opposed to bringing on more and more new people. So it's become easier to manage that way. But now I'm getting back into the saddle of being a creator again with my own series, after kind of putting a lot of that off for years and just focusing on being a publisher. Now I'm juggling that along with being a publisher, and being creative again has been so fantastic. Not having to just hold on to stories and be like, yeah, maybe one day maybe I'll get to do that, and then maybe see someone else eventually do it with another story where I'm like, that was very similar to an idea that I wish I did, and I wish
we can get a little esoteric about this, but once you speak it into reality, I've had some ideas that I'm like, how is it possible that this thing to manifest? It's almost like if you get that idea, you're like called to do it. You better do it, because you will look around the corner and it will be getting done. It's crazy.
Yeah. And if you want to come back for another esoteric conversation, we do that a lot on this channel too. So we can have a follow-up interview and go down that path. I'm all about that.
I love that. I love the Alan Moore stuff. I love thinking about where we get these ideas. Or if I don't think we're creating them, I think we're finding them in that ether. And On Writing talks about, it's like an archaeology dig of that. We got our waking life in the material world, but half of our mind is floating into this other space. And story, when you get it, you get like a scene, or you get a piece, and it's like you get a femur of a T-Rex and what fits next to it, and that informs the next thing. And it's like puzzle. It's like you're finding pieces of a puzzle, or you're doing this creative archaeological dig. And plot is almost like you're putting the stakes with the rope around, and then you got to go digging and find the pieces. And sometimes those pieces you might love, but they don't fit. That's like killing your darlings. But man, I love thinking about like all that weird eating too much mushrooms and thinking about where these ideas come from. And Alan Moore breaks it down really well. But to spell is simply to spell. The book of grammar, the grimoire is just grammar. And you can change people's lives. You could drive someone with words, we know this now, to end themselves. You can use spells. There can take, you can literally do this with your work. It's like art is magic, and that's what Alan Moore's rant is,
Everything, even to just break it down in an easier to understand kind of way, everything that you have ever done in your entire life, anything everyone has ever done, anything that we look at and appreciate is the result of imagination and manifesting that thought into reality and putting that thought into action. And that's everything. And if we never have the thought, if we never imagine something into existence and go about it and create it and make it a reality, it never would happen. It would never be there. So it's interesting to think about in terms of when people kind of poo-poo that stuff and you go, oh, that sounds like wishy thinking and this, that. It's not wishy thinking. Wishy thinking is you sit there and you just think it and you'll think it into existence, and that's not going to happen. But having that thought and putting the step-by-step plan of action, that brings about a whole, whatever you want to call this, reality, anything, the existence in front of you. And it's amazing to think about that could happen, that you have these thoughts, where they come from, who the hell knows half the time. Maybe we're getting them from something, maybe something is getting transmitted to us, maybe we're picking up on something from others. There's all kinds of different things you can go down that road with energy and whatever else, because everything is energy, frequency, resonance. Yeah. So
but you're right.
It's a great topic.
If you want to get like to the literal, like you did, this whole room, the room behind you, this computer we're talking through, these were all ideas in people's heads. These are designs.
Yeah.
And it gets into the Plato's, shapes and forms, and like when you would you rather have one perfect chair, or would you rather have the idea for the chair that manifests all the chairs? You know what I mean? Like, which one's more important? Now, the idea might be nothing to the average material man. They just want that chair. But I think the idea is everything to the imaginative man that could produce all the chairs again. And there's a yin and yang to it. Obviously, you can't be off in La La Land all the time. And a big thing you said is you can think about this stuff, but the craft is the doing. The craft is the materializing it into this world. And you got to, that'll reground you, if you ever get lost in La La Land when you think about this stuff. But it's interesting, man. Who pops these ideas into our heads? How do we all have them? Is it because we're all coming from the same culture and we have the same mirrors reflected on us with what media we're intaking? Why? Is it because it's needed at the time? And my buddy had this thing. He said science fiction is whatever the big program running everything is. Science fiction is the beta test. So like all of a sudden 1984 hits and it actually is the right beta test for what's happening now. But the other ideas aren't as good. But some ideas like the cell phone or something, like, can you imagine that we all individually think we're doing something, but from the whole, we're all running the beta test for the system? That's so cool, man. That's so crazy.
It's a whole rabbit hole that we unfortunately don't have time to go down today, but maybe in the future. We'll see. Man, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on today, Nick. Really appreciate it. The conversation was awesome, and I'm glad we had it, man. Thank you.
Man, it means so much that you had me on and let me yap to your audience. Anytime you want me back, I'll definitely come back. It's super cool. Like, anytime someone reaches out, and I don't know if we have similar friends or run in similar circles, but I've seen your stuff so much, and never got to talk to you. And you always seem like a really cool guy in the interviews, and I've known you as a publisher for a long time now. So, but we never talked, we never met, and just really thankful that you would have me on and get to talk comics and making comics, and it's my favorite thing to talk about, and it just means the world that you'd have me on and let me yap to your audience.
Well, I'm glad we could do it, man. Yeah, it's the same thing. I've been seeing you around a lot of the things. I'm like, yeah, this guy's got a good head on his shoulders. I got to have a conversation with him and find a way to work that in. So I'm glad we were able to do that.
Sweet, man.
And hopefully we get more of these. I think everybody enjoyed it too. Everyone seemed to, you got some nice, great show. Yeah, thank you for the compliments and the comments, guys. Appreciate it. All right, Nick, before you go, where can they find you, and where would you like to point them to find more of your stuff?
I use Twitter quite a bit, Instagram sometimes, but just Nick PITARRA on Twitter or Nick PITARRA on Instagram. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'll have Probably that action figure, in a little while. That's going to be a big challenge, but that'll be the next thing I'm hyping up. They're probably 6 months, 7, 8 months away before I try to tackle that. But yeah, if anyone wants to hit me up or reach out or friend me, I usually follow people back if they're relatively normal, or I try to, or especially if they're creatives or aspiring creatives. I love seeing people's stuff. So follow me on Twitter, and I'll try to follow you guys back and check out y'all's stuff too. So really appreciate everyone listening, and it was cool that so many people were active in the chat, and hopefully we didn't bore them to death. So
I don't think they had a second to be bored. Nick, thank you again so much, man. Have a wonderful night. Everybody in the chat, thank you guys too. Thank you for your questions, your comments, your participation, your jokes, and your ball busting. Chad, handsome pelican.
Chad.
Thank you guys for being here, everyone. Until tomorrow, I'll be back then. At that point, 10 o'clock tomorrow with Madison Hawthorne. I'll be back with Golden Tree Publishing. I think he's the head honcho there. I'll be back with him tomorrow night to have a conversation. Until then, everybody have a great night and an even better tomorrow. I'll see you guys soon. All the best.
You guys.